Welcome back to the fifth video of Data and Formula Integrity. In this video, we're going to be summarizing data while keeping the integrity of the spreadsheet. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're using this same spreadsheet, March travel expenses, and it's nicely formatted. It has a title, it has headings, it has data nicely formatted, and it has a total. And I want to point out to you guys that these headings are labeled in the sense that everything will be vertically put in on the spreadsheet. So if we have more travel expenses, the page will just be shifted downward. We can scroll using our mouse. I'll see sometimes when people have copied these headings and instead of having it listed across there, they'll have it listed vertically. And then they'll start listing all their dates left and right, and same with all the rest of the content here. So I want to point out that you should not make a spreadsheet that spans horizontally and wastes horizontal space. The reasons why is, number one, scrolling is difficult. You have to come down and use this scroll bar down here because you can't scroll with your mouse anymore. Number two, it's hard to read. And then number three, there's no way you can print this very well with pages left and right. And thinking about if you have them printed out, and you're setting it on a table, you're lining up pages left and right, and it takes up much more space than it would have if you're going the vertical way. Now let's get started summarizing this data. I'm just going to delete this, Control minus. And so how do we want to summarize it? We could summarize it by employee, we could summarize it by the type of expense that they've made, or if it's been paid or not. But let's go ahead and let's say employee, and then if it's been paid or not, the expense. We're just going to have, let me type it over here. So I'm going to have the employee, and I'm going to have if it's paid, question mark. And so let's copy this data over here. You'll see in a second what I'm doing. So I'm just going to hold Control C and paste it, Control V. And notice that it actually snapped these two selections together over here when I pasted it and did not include this blank space. I want to get rid of all of the duplicate lines. So I'm going to use the built-in function, remove duplicates. It's on the data tab, and it's called remove duplicate. My data does have headings, so I'm going to hit OK. And I only have 4 unique values remaining. Okay, great. Now let's sort this in a better way. So actually, let's just sort it. So I'm coming up here, I'm going to put on my filter. I like filters better. And A to Z, and then going back to the employee, A to Z. So I have Jack's, no and yes, and then Jill's, no and yes paid. Now I need an amount, so I'm going to copy that, paste it over here. And let's go the old-fashioned way. This could be done simply by using a pivot table, but I'm going to use sum if formula, or sum ifs formula. And the point of this video is not to go ahead and think about the formula that I'm going to be writing here, so sum ifs, but it's to just understand that we're trying to summarize this data and make it automatically update so that we have very little input and we can keep the integrity of it intact. So sum ifs, the sum range will be here. I'm going to lock it up, F4. Then the criteria range, first one we'll look at, is it Jack or Jill? Lock it up, F4. And we're going to look at the criteria I'm looking at for this range. So I want it to be Jack, F4, until I'm going to lock up just on the columns, and comma. The second criteria that I want to look at is if it's been paid or not. Lock that up, F4, the comma. The last thing, so those yes or no's, and this one it's going to be no. I'm going to lock up just the column because I want the row to be able to copy down and look at the next criterias after. I'm going to close the parentheses. Again, don't worry about how to write this formula. Just know that it's possible and that we'll go over it in a video coming up in the formulas section. Hit enter. We have $313.25 here. I'm not sure if that's right or not, but let's go ahead and check. Drag the formula down. It automatically looks at the next criteria, Jack and yes. Same with Jill and no, and Jill and yes. Okay, so let's make the formula for summing it up. And my shortcut actually is Alt and the plus sign, and it'll automatically do the sum formula. It'll recognize what I'm looking at. Hit enter. And awesome, these two look the same. Perfect. So let's go ahead and put a title to this. Let's put summary travel expenses. I just held shift and arrowed over, merge and center it, put a little background to it, and then outside borders, let's center it that way and increase the size a bit. So now that these things look pretty much the same. This is missing these underlines, so actually let's take this selection. Let's do the format painter. I'm just going to hold Control and Shift and arrow to the right. Looks like this got caught up in a day type of a format, so let's change that back to number or counting. That looks good. Let's bold this guy. Let's put on this same underline here. So we have top border and bottom thick. Where am I looking? There we go. And total here. Okay, great. So let's now put in a little check. So let's put in a variance calculation saying equals, arrow up to this guy, minus the other total in our main spreadsheet. Hit enter. It's 0. I usually like to make this a little smaller and then italicize it as well. So I see that there's a minus here, meaning 0, and there's no difference between here. Let's go ahead and do the exact same thing, that making this dynamic spreadsheet, and do it in pivot table format quickly. So I'm going to select this entire range. So you could go up here, control to the right, down, arrow it back up with shift, and then insert pivot table. You'll get this dialog box that pops up. It recognizes that we've selected this range. It's even putting the little lines around it. And we want to put it on this same worksheet. And the location, I'm going to come over here, click it, and let's put it right here and hit enter and enter again. And our pivot table will pop up. We have a whole bunch of fields that we can use, but let's just use this exact same example. You just watch how simple and quick this will be compared to writing this entire spreadsheet over here. So employees, and we're going to take the paid as a row label, and we're going to put in the amounts as the sum. Now it kind of looks the same. It gives us the same total. That's great, but we're missing a row or a column here. So let's go up to the design, change the design from report layout to tabular form. That makes it on each column. And then let's change it to repeat all item labels. So let's go there. And now we have all Jacks, all Jills, yes and no. We actually even have a subtotal in here for both Jack and Jill, and then the grand total. So we can get rid of those subtotals for right now. So let's go back to design, and subtotals do not show subtotals. Okay. So now it's exactly like it is up above. Let's change the formatting so we put some commas in there. All right, perfect. Okay, so let's put a variance here. Variance, and then C equals this guy minus the main spreadsheet. Hit enter. Okay, so let's just copy this same formatting, right click, and you can get to that thing quicker. I'm just going to drag it across here. And it's 0 again, it's the minus. Perfect. Now, here's what's cool. Here's what we just created. We just created a dynamic way to go ahead and summarize this spreadsheet over here and on this pivot table. Now, what I mean by dynamically summarize it is, if I'm going to copy in more data or add more data in, I'm going to hold Control C and then drag this down to select a whole bunch of more rows, and then hold Control and Shift and plus, or you could say Insert Copied Cell. And I just copied a whole bunch of other things in here. Now, I don't know if you caught it, but this formula just updated. This used to say like $2,000. Now it's at $5,000 because it's adding all of these $650 for Jack as yes. And you see Jack, yes, has $4,300 now. Down here in the pivot table, though, we have a variance. It sticks out like a sore thumb. You can see that it's different. And the thing is that you have to manually update pivot tables. So you select the pivot table to recognize that it's active, go up to the pivot table tools, click on Analyze, and then hit refresh. And it will automatically refresh. So these are two quick ways. This one, immediately dynamic, where updates automatically. You can see that's because we typed this formula at the beginning, and then also down here with the pivot table.